And
I'm your other host, Morgan.
we are two sisters
By marriage,
who love to talk about stories.
from writing fiction to creating elaborate plot lines in D&D,
To creating campaigns that will wow your players.
we're out of initiative. Today we're talking about story structure. Building a story, writing a story that will wow your players. Both, at the table, D&D, and, like, with narrative fiction, obviously, because we like to talk about both here. So, okay, look, I'm really bad about dropping plot hooks that I think are fun, and not necessarily things that move the story forward. Like, I just like, oh, it'd be really funny if all those birds got that message at the same time. Like, so I'm kind of a little bit off the rails. But I also really want the players to feel like they have a ton of control over the story. So how do we meet in the middle? Like, I don't want to railroad anybody, but like also like it doesn't matter how many clues you drop, they're not gonna get it. Like, love you, but you guys don't pick up clues and like story hooks all the time. Maybe that's a me thing, maybe that's an us thing, maybe it's like a little bit of both. So like, where do we even start as we're talking about like writing a story and keeping people engaged?
I think what you're experiencing, every single DM on the earth experiences that, right? I mean, they talk about all the time. I've left these breadcrumbs and my players want to just go pet the dog. They don't want to go in the dungeon. And what do I do? And I can't give you a specific answer, but I think if you have the right mindset that this is supposed to be fun and your players are having fun, then you're probably doing okay. You're probably doing right. Now, it's probably not progressing the story like you want it or as you would like it to go. And there's some techniques, I'm sure, that you could implement that I feel like with writing a story or writing a novel where you have like the pacing is slowed down. And we've discussed this before about outlining because otherwise you just write yourself into a corner, right? Or it's just going nowhere. Your characters are just treading water. They're just spinning in circles. And I'm sure as a DM, seeing your players do that is frustrating. And then your players feel it too. Like, they feel like if they're not progressing, and we're not just talking like leveling up. You know, leveling up, sure, you know, you're hitting milestones, that kind of thing. But overall, as a character, and the story itself, if they don't feel like it's progressing, they're going to get bored. And that's the last thing you want to have happen. Same with your reader. That's the last thing, because as soon as they're bored, they close the book. And that's the end of that. So I feel like there's some things you can add to your sessions and the overall campaign. And these are just techniques I use as a writer when I know a part of my story, either I've had feedback from another reader or critique partner that is just saying like, hey, this is slowed down. Or the biggest thing is I was reading this chapter and then I just skimmed this part. And that's just, oh, okay, we need to do something about that. Because whenever they skim, it's just wasted, right? They always say like,
right,
you got to cut the extra fluff stuff. So a lot of it with D&D, you can't really just cut that because it's like for the moment stuff. And so when we were thinking about this, I was trying to think back on like, what I've seen DMs either like streaming online or what I've seen in our campaigns that kind of starts moving things along. 'Cause you don't want that stagnation. And, you know, I feel like, you know, checking the bounty board is definitely something, you know, players do, but you could just have anything kind of unusual occur and kind of draw them that way. But with like writing, it's definitely have that time pressure. I think that's like the number one thing you could do that wouldn't make it feel like you're railroading your players. If there's not necessarily like a ticking time bomb, and you could think like in our campaign, you know, you have 10 days till this event is happening. So then we can plan, like we want to do something else in between, but we know we got to get back for that. And I think that's great because it gives you like, as a character, structure of what we want to plan and do. And we're already looking 10 days ahead to the future. And I think that's great because then you're not just getting up in the morning like, what am I going to do? You know?
What are we up to today? Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But I feel like you could do you know, if someone as a cursed object, all of a sudden it's increased its effects, and now they need to deal with that, and the only person they can deal with it is at this place where you want them to go. I mean, you can always drop those little things. Time, you know, have a time limit, but you could also have um, anything like maybe an ability they no longer have.
Ooh, love that.
Because there's kind of a time on that too. Like, how long do you want to not go without this ability? You know, like my warlock without Eldritch Blast. What is she? You know,
What is she without Eldritch Blast?
If that just went away for some reason, there would be a million questions. She would wonder why. What happened to her patron? Did she do something wrong? Is someone cursed her? I mean, it would just a million questions, and the whole party would have to deal with that. So I feel like you could add a little pressure in just one area and see where it goes. And if they don't respond to it, it's fine. But I feel like that's something like in stories and books, you'd leave those little, like what do they say, red herrings. You know, you kind of leave those little. And I know there's that metaphor for that gun too, and I can't remember.
Oh, leaving a gun on the table.
Yeah, it was like Chekhov's gun or something,
yes.
where you leave it and everybody knows it's there, and so they're expecting it to have like be used, right? So, I mean, I think that's some stuff that you could implement and not have your characters feel like they're being pressured into doing something, because they can still, you know, I like even without Eldritch Blast, I can still do other things. Like, I'm not completely powerless. And we've talked about this.
She's got her charm.
She has other abilities. I think that's the thing we've ran into with, like, sometimes you feel like you're powerless. You're put into a corner. Your character is put into a corner, and they don't know. You as the player and the character don't know how to get out of it. And I think that's when your story really grinds to a halt, and no one's having fun when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely true. So something that happened in a recent game, because you want that time element. I love that idea. And I think that's something that has helped me a lot as a DM. Like, between now and this date, something's going to happen. And you know the date it's going to happen. And actually something, as we're coming into this sort of like third arc here of the campaign that I'm running, I started to realize that, like, not putting you guys on rails by not having anything super linear, it was just leaving too many options. So what I decided to do was give you guys some clearer options. So there is an event coming up, and at that event you can get something that will help you be stronger against this enemy that you've heard is in a specific area. And the party, and I even literally said to the group, like, okay, you have a choice that I would like you guys to consider and make, which is, do you want to, you know the enemy, you know what they're capable of, you have a pretty good idea of what might be there, so you could go right now and hope to catch them before they gain new information on you and become stronger, or you can wait until this event where you can pick up this magic item that's going to help you do better. You can choose either of those, or you can choose to say, like, saving the world's not my problem, and then the story is going to take a pretty dramatic shift as you guys just see the fallout of not taking on this major enemy. And in my mind, I'm like, I know what happens, right? There's point A, and then there's point B, and, like, whether or not you guys interfere is the only thing that influences the story. So if you decide not to, I know what the villain's plan is, so we can just roll with it. And it helped kind of guide you guys a little bit, and it ended up prompting the whole group to make, I think we've talked about this before, prompting the whole group to make a list of what they wanted to tackle between our current point in the game and the, this next time-bound event. And it was amazing because now I can look at that list and go, oh, cool, I know exactly what matters to you all. You cared about this plot point, and no one picked up on the fact that Grim Durkath's wife has been missing for 7 to 10 years. Like, no one picked up on it, so great, we should move on and it shouldn't matter. Although, see, this is where I struggle, because then she's stuck on the ethereal plane, and, like, has been for many years, and I was like, oh, multiple members of the party have the ability to see into the ethereal plane. You guys check people all the time. Yeah. You're gonna look, you're gonna see that there's this lady there, she's gonna be like, help, I'm stuck here, I've been here for 7 to 10 years, which is, like, the time point that everything takes place in the story. Cause look, it was my first try, okay? So I was like, oh, it'll be so funny that like you guys will look through and see her there. And then no one did anything. So time passed. And I was like, I should probably drop this. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, okay, her path would be she would have gone here, and then she would have made her way back to where you guys are to try to like see if she can communicate more with you because you guys are the heroes that are gonna save everything. And somebody happened to look into the ethereal plane in the bar while you guys were there. So now it's like dropped this whole new like side story if you guys decide to pursue it, which you don't have to. And it was just like, I wish I could like, if I as the writer could focus a little bit more, I think that it would be more help. I think it would help you guys because like it can't be easy to decide which direction to go when you've got all these like random little threads coming out. So that's something that I'm really struggling with and I'm actually really actively working on. And then I can juxtapose that with the time-bound element that the players didn't even plan ahead for in Isaac's campaign. So in the other campaign that we're playing in, the party returned to Phandalin, kind of our little home away from home for the time being, to a huge fire that had broken out in town. We were like, we're gonna get some R&R, it's gonna be great. We had no real plan. And there were even comments within the group of, oh yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do next. I guess we'll return to the bounty board, right? A great tool. But when we get close, we see smoke and it's near some of the people that we care about. And so we come charging in and all of a sudden we learn that like someone else might be responsible for this. And now that we know who was potentially responsible, the party is really like called to action. And now we're like a week into the woods off trying to kill a bunch of people who started a fire. Like it's great. Like, and that added a really, tangible time-bound element and a really like visceral enemy for like a goal for us to chase. It was like, okay, these people are bad, they hurt our friend, they started a fire, we have to take them out, we have to fix this. Also, that group is very like the himbos, like they're just so
yeah,
they're so like one-track minded and like classic video game characters.
they
Like,
kind of
off
are.
we go.
Yeah.
I'll kill them. The door's ajar. I'll let myself in. And you're like, no, that's someone's home.
My work here is done.
Exactly. Smoldering town behind them. Like, all right, well, there we go. Did it.
I feel like you were saying you're giving too many threads. You have to understand, too, that in our instance, there's 5 players, 5 characters, all with different motivations, levels of motivation, end goals, choices. So if you're writing a book or a story, it's just the author. Yeah, there might be multiple characters, but it's still my voice. It's still my choice. It's still the character. You know, a lot of authors joke about the characters have control. They do a little bit, but I ultimately have control of what these side characters are doing or what these main characters are doing. And in D&D, you just don't. And I think you have to step back and think, what do you have control of? What do you have control of? You have control of the world that you built, or if you're using a book, you know, you have control of the NPCs. And I feel like that's one of the biggest, most important aspects of any campaign are the NPCs, because we talk about like role playing. You role play so heavily with the DM in those instances, and then as a DM, you get to interact and drop those bits of lore or quest things, that kind of thing. The more interesting and unique your NPCs are, the more the characters are going to want to spend time with them. And in which case, question, learn things, that kind of thing. And I feel like as a player, I tend to, you might, I don't know, you have to support me on this. I feel like I ask a lot of questions.
I think it's great. I think you should ask a lot of questions.
I feel like I'm always, how long have you been here? What do you do? What's your name? Should we be afraid? Like, I feel like both my characters, I feel like I ask a lot of questions, and I know a lot of the other players don't. They just don't. They're like, maybe ask the name, and then that's about it. They kind of just stand back and either just listen or just aren't invested in learning more about that. And I feel like the NPCs, and so if you think of it like in a story in a book too, that's what kind of pushes your character different directions. And there's always talk about, you make your D&D character, they start at level 1, and each time they level up, there's growth. either their strength or they're making better decisions. Like maybe they have a bad past and now they're kind of, redemption. There's a little bit of an arc for your character, but I feel like, yes, you can have that, but not everyone wants that, right? As a player.
Right, true, yeah.
And to implement that satisfactorily is a very high goal. If you can, you know what I mean? It's high because you have all these other components at play, the other characters at play, the whole world at play, bigger things at play. So if your character, the amount of growth from level 1 to level 10 or level 15, I feel like as a DM, you don't need to really focus on that as much as the growth of the world around the character. So
like the impact, yeah,
the impact that character makes, the ripple effects because of that character. And one example I was thinking is, and this is all story arc structure. There's tons of like, Brandon Sanderson's got a great one on this. There's just lots of writing conferences that talk about this. Everyone's very, very into that hero's journey.
Yeah.
Like arc, right?
Yeah.
And there are other arcs in the world. Shocker.
It's not just what Joseph Campbell has to say. Like there is more outside of Joseph Campbell.
Right. So so with the hero's journey, you start out, they're nothing. They're a normal person. They're average, right? And then throughout the story, they become here. They're here to here. And if you can think of your D&D character, if they start at level 1 or level 3, or wherever you start, they're already above average. They're already set. Yeah, right? So an example I think of is like James Bond. Okay? He, in his stories, doesn't grow. Not really. Not really.
True.
He's super cool. He's great at shooting and capturing people. He says cool lines. He looks cool. He goes after girls, drives cars real fast. He doesn't really grow. Not much. Maybe he makes choices and it gets him in trouble. And then he has to like somehow get back in the good graces. But a lot of times he doesn't care. What is it? MI6? Is that what he works with? MI6. It's British, right?
I think that's right. Yeah. I'm just thinking about like, I guess he's like a little less sexist by the end, but like a little. A little.
But he's still, from when he, like the very first James Bonds until, like he's, you know what I mean? So he's not growing or changing, not much, but everyone around him is. The people at MI6 or, they're so desperate to save these people or to find this lost diamond or whatever. And then he does it and they're just so grateful. And they just gives them hope and belief that there's justice in the world, that kind of thing. So it's like Superman's the same way. There's not a lot of growth with Superman. He just has cool powers. He saves things, but think of like the innocent people he saves. Like that changes their world. That changes their life. And he himself is just him. So if you can think of your players or your characters as kind of that way, I feel like you're going to get more, because that's the ultimate goal is your characters your players want to feel cool. They want to feel like they're making a difference in the world, that they have the power to change and shape their world. And that, as I looped back around, that was a long way to get back to
we made it.
the NPCs. So that comes all the way back to the NPCs. So if they are interested, they feel either sorry for the NPC or this NPC is cool or there's something funny about them, and then they feel invested to help them, and they go and do whatever they need to do and come back. That satisfaction of job well done. I'm powerful. I'm using my ability for good, or they're along for money, whatever they're using their power for. I think it all comes back down to the NPCs, the characters that you are placing in front of them. Another one thing that I remember with like romance writing, they talk about there's romance story beats. The same thing. It's not hero's journey. Like there's a romance arc if you want to write a romantic novel. And it was interesting. This one author was saying, you have your main character and say it's a female lead and there's a male love interest. have her have a best friend, go out and do something, and have the best friend comment on the male lead's appearance, or they say something funny, or thereabouts. Have like a third party, non-biased character comment on that, because your main character's not really gonna say that. They might say it in their head, but to have them say that out loud or mention it, it makes it three-dimensional. It makes it real, and it just exposes more of the world that this, oh, so someone else thinks this guy's hot too. And then you can do it on the flip side too, like have the main character's best friend say something about, oh, you're rocking that dress, or I wish I had hair like you, or something, and have that, because your main character's not be like, I'm looking, well, maybe they do, I don't know.
I think that I support that. I support a main character who's like, dang, I snatched today.
I'm
like, yeah.
that. But most of the time, they don't. And so have that third party. So with your NPCs saying, you guys are cool, you saved the town, like, they're gonna get that. You don't do finger guns.
I think finger guns are required now, actually.
Every NPC.
Every NPC is gonna be like, pow, hey man, how you doing?
Here's your 50 gold. Thanks for saving us. Yeah, so that's, how else do they know, right? I mean, how else do they know that they're shaping or changing the world if they're not getting that feedback?
Yeah, I think we touched on this like a little bit, I think, in a previous podcast episode, talking about like the party going through and giving like an ungodly amount of money to the resident, like the slum area of a teeny tiny little podunk town, and then like coming back later and they like started a cult, like worshiping the guy who'd given them all the money, and it's just like a kind of fun way to say like, you impacted the world. So the thing that's kind of interesting with NPCs though is like they kind of are a little bit of a tightrope act as a DM in terms of like execution, because like for me, I get really attached to NPCs. You may have noticed they tend to have little voices and little like silliness and like a little bit too much backstory that no one really cares about. Like, why did every single vendor at the weigh-in have a specific backstory and like 5 to 10 bullet points? Like, I don't know why I needed to do that. It was really unnecessary. You guys really glossed over them, like, because it doesn't matter. But just in case you guys were asking questions, I was like, yeah, he's from, you know, this area up north, the Star Mounts, and he's come through and he escaped his like, I don't, you know, whatever. So I get really excited about NPCs, and I will like kind of put too much I'll insert myself too much into the story, and that is something that's really hard and that like I really have to actively think about, especially when I have like a main quest giver, and like in the beginning of the story there's like one main person, you keep coming back to her and she's like the quest giver. That's how I'm gonna run the campaign too as well. Sneak peeks for you. You're gonna have a patron, like an actual person who's like, I need you to do this thing. I've seen a lot of campaigns run this way. I think it's a really nice way to bring a group together. And I have an idea, like, and I get really invested in these NPCs, so this is a really fun way for the story to move for me.
Are you saying
like
one quest giver?
Yeah, like one specific, well, I mean, like, you guys are gonna get quests from all kinds of people.
But I feel like you did that with this one. We had Elvira. We had like the one, she was kind of the glue for everybody.
And she was the glue. She kind of like brought everybody back together.
It was fantastic.
But we're gonna do like a proper patron in the next step, because because Elvira like has too much information for her own good, and she's like a little bit like, I keep waiting for you guys to be like, is she actually good or is she bad? Because like she knows way too much, and I think it's great. I think it's a hoot. I love it. But in order to not like insert myself so much, I try to like pull back at least a little bit, like leave a little bit of room for the players to ask questions. But then when we get a player like you who's in there like, tell me about your life, I want to know, like, answer all, like, I want to ask some questions, I want to know what you're about. And then it's like, it's so exciting for me as a DM. Like, I love like getting into that, although sometimes they're not planned, and I'm like, his name is Mervin and he is an awakened shrub, and like I can't give you anything more than that. That's what I've got. Like so yeah, it's just kind of like, it's a fine line, because I want them to have these like rich stories, and I want the world to feel alive as these people are moving around within it, and like people are taking office and stuff is happening, and like I've got a big timeline, and like it doesn't always impact the story, and the party doesn't always impact what's happening, and like that's really hard too, because I want you guys to leave a mark wherever you go. And I also, like, you're level 9, like don't get too big for your britches, you're not like changing the world yet, like easy, okay? So it's kind of a balance there, because I know the group wants to feel powerful, who doesn't? And they want to be like, I have this great ability and I impact the world that I'm in, and sometimes it's like, who are you again? Like, I don't remember you. And I think that there's like kind of a nice balance. Although you guys were recently fighting a major enemy that the party multiple times was like, I don't think they know who we are. Like they sent an assassin to you. Like they know who you are. Like now they really know who you are, because you did just show up and then like infiltrate the crypt, and now that's a whole thing. But like, yeah, it's a little bit of give and take. It's definitely a balancing act that we wouldn't be doing so much if it was like outside the table, like purely narrative. I think it's a little bit easier to balance. I mean, but I guess it also happens in writing, right? Like I have a side character that ended up being kind of a bigger deal than I expected, and now they're kind of a major point in the story. Do I rewrite the character to fit better within the structure, or do I rework the structure to make more sense around this character? I've definitely done that before, like have a side character, get really attached, and then like, well, she's getting a short story, like time for a spinoff.
Yeah, I've done that where I've had, the side character's supposed to have very small influence, and then they end up being a big part of the whole story, and I love it. And outlining, they say you don't have to. It's not concrete. It is just the bones of your story, and your campaign that you created should be that same way. It's just the bones. The characters will make everything else part of it. As far as like the NPCs, not, us not questioning or that kind of, I feel like you could reward the players when they do something, I don't want to say right, but what if we pull on a thread that is the correct way? Give a little reward. I mean, how else are we supposed to know? Or how are you supposed to know? And then vice versa, give a little punishment. So I think when you're writing a story, it's the same way. Your character has been mad at their best friend the whole time because of something silly. They finally swallow their pride and go talk to their best friend, and their best friend gives them the best advice that they need at that time. Or, oh, you need help with this? Well, I know this person. Like, it's that reward to the reader, and the character has finally grown and made a choice. They need to get rewarded for that. There needs to be, and it can be small, but it needs to be obvious that they're on the right path. That the golden brick road has kind of appeared, like, oh, like a little crumb. This is the right way. And so, and as far as rewarding, indeed, I mean, I don't know. Magic weapons, yeah. Gold, yeah. Armor, but even just like, I don't know, NPC. Hey, I heard you took care of those bandits. Drinks on the house. Something just like a little bit of a reward that, oh, okay, we're doing the right thing. This is the right way. And then vice versa, like, oh, you get in trouble.
So, okay, I want to talk about this more, because I at first thought you meant that, hello, Darfin, I heard you run the portals in the R Deep Wood. Tell me more about the portals. And he's like, oh, well, I've actually been a portal keeper for, and then he like goes in my mind, if the players pull the right thread, the reward is the NPC will spill a lot more information, like maybe give more, and kind of like, but some people, like, we have a player in our group that sometimes would be talking to an NPC and they'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I started selling drugs because I lost, a member of my family. And he was like, oh my God, I don't care. Why does this guy keep opening up to me? So for him, it was like, I pulled the wrong thread, punishment. And it really was about like, I need to gauge the NPCs based on how the player wants to interact, because as that character, he's just like, no, this character doesn't care about like the side people. He just wants to do what the group wants to do, and like maybe go get some drugs, like,
Yeah. And again, your players' motivations are all going to be different. So I'm not, being a DM is hard. It's really hard because each of your players are going to want something different. A reward is different. In my case, an NPC spilling something really important, a puzzle piece, some sort of knowledge or lore. Oh, that name, I know that name. Oh my gosh, it's the best feeling, right? So I'm so glad that I stopped and talked to this person. I'm going to continue doing that if I, or I'm going to follow up with this other person. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pulling that thread. I'm going to keep going. So yeah, in my case, I suppose a new weapon is nice or money is nice, but that is the biggest thing with me. And I think it's just because I like reading and I like stories, and so I like to know more about the stories. But yeah, determining what your characters at your table, your players at your table would find as a reward. That's just the ultimate challenge and goal. But it differs from table to table, campaign to campaign, character to character. So you just kind of have to. I know, like as a DM, you're like going and going, but like the note taking, if you can like just do little notes, like, oh, so and so was interested in meat pies, just put a little note in there. And so I think the more notes you can keep and draw later, to kind of reward if they do pursue the right path. How else do you know, right?
So then conversely, when you're talking about punishing a player, this is where I think things get a little sticky, because as a DM, I sure hope you guys are invested in this story that I've drafted, and I want you to go in a specific direction or choose at least one of 3 directions that I have planned, that I'm like prepared for. But I do know that some DMs have a very linear path that they hope the players will travel on, and the punishment is more like ending up unable to take a long rest, or getting cursed, or having demons visit you in your sleep. That's a bad example. That last one was really fun when that happened in Isaac's game.
I was going to say, I would kind of like that, actually.
That one actually was a hoot. That was a great time. But like, it can definitely feel more like punishing the player than punishing the character, and that's kind of tough. So we had like kind of a sticky area that I want your input on really recently. Not last Sunday, but like 3 Sundays ago, the last plushie session that we did, when your character was trying to get more information out of what you presume to be a big-ish bad Amalia Castellanter. You were saying like, oh, let me help you, and then you began to cast some magic, thinking you would lift any curse that she might be on. So you tried to cast remove curse, but her husband's standing right there thinking that you're casting magic on her.
I was.
You were. Yeah. I reread the section. Specifically, it says that if she falls below a certain amount of hit points, he would banish her to safety. But in the moment, as I was remembering it, I was like, I think he would banish you to try to get you to stop so he could try to control the situation. I want to reward you as a player for this really interesting action, because like what a fun way for the story to develop. But I need to punish the character for attempting to do magic against someone's without consent. And so we ended up in this like really sticky spot where the party was in this fight and you were banished, and that guy could not fail the save. I was rolling so hot, and then like the following session, ones for the entire. I like, come on, man, throw me a 1. I would love the player to come back so you can participate in this combat.
Yeah.
But like, it feels like such a difficult like thing to navigate. And in the moment, I had asked you like, do you have a backup character, because I think something might happen here and I want to gauge how you feel. And later Isaac had pointed out, he was like, I think if you ask a player something like that at the table, like you're really putting them on the spot, and I don't think that's very fair. So I'm still thinking through that kind of bit too, is like, what's that like code phrase of like, I can see what I think would happen here, and I'm worried it's going to ruin your fun. So I want to pause and say, how do you feel?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. If you feel like it's going to ruin fun because of the person, not the character, then you definitely just need to talk out of game. You need it. I think that was a great call. Yeah. I think it was great.
And we did end up like, bringing her back like right afterwards. I did force a fail.
Yeah.
I rolled like twice as many as I needed, and then eventually landed on a fail, and then was able to bring her back. I was making him he has like 3 hit points. I was forcing him to make con saves on every turn, as he's like in deep pain and carrying his dead wife or whatever. So, and then he did fail, and I fudge it? Yeah, absolutely. In order to like roll more times to like get to that point. But like, I really want, like, that was how I wanted this to go, is like, I really wanted you back in the game because there's no reason for you to be on another plane. just because it's your home plane and you weren't going to come back. Details.
Matt Mercer said this when a certain character passed away in campaign 2. There has to be stakes. There has to be some stakes. So I made a bold choice as a character, knowing that these like bads that we were against were pretty powerful. So I love the consequence. I mean, I would have loved a different consequence, but I love that there was a consequence. I put in an action and I got a reaction, and it was great. It was great, and I was totally fine sitting out. I think it adds, we discussed, to the drama a little bit. If you have a character incapacitated for a while, it adds to the drama. And I could see everyone else's video, and they were stressing, and you could tell they were kind of going through their turns a little quicker than they normally do, and they were trying to figure out things, and it just added a little bit of stress. And I think that was great. I can't speak for every player. I know I've been in encounters with a character that was frightened, and I had to make wisdom save after wisdom save after wisdom save for 3 hours or 2 hours. That was pretty frustrating. Yeah. That was frustrating as a player. I feel like if there was any option to get out of that, I was tapped. I didn't have any choice. And I feel like that's where you start, I wouldn't say railroading, but it's that powerless. Whenever the players at the table make a choice and get a consequence, the consequence needs to be something that they can deal with. They either can ask for help, or can use a spell, or can take a nap. Maybe they just need to sleep it off. And they want to unattune from this weapon. There's consequences, but then that's over. I think it's the powerless factor that is the most frustrating. And as a DM, if you need to fudge rolls to get this, over with, because you can tell when your player's frustrated. You can tell. You can pick up on that. So if someone's not having fun, how can you get through this, or what can you give them, or nudge them? And the subtlety, I mean, that's DM tricks right there. How can you kind of nudge them to show, hey, you can get out of this. You're not stuck in a corner. This is what you need to do. And maybe it's something, the session ends, that you do need to talk offline or off game and say, these are your options, or what are you thinking? That's, I think, the biggest, is have the players say, well, what are you thinking? You're cursed now. What are you thinking? How do you think you'll get out of this? And then have them give their options, and then maybe one of those is gonna work. So,
and that's, have the player give what they consider to be options, so that you can find one that works within what you have in mind, not so you can meticulously plan how to block each option. I feel like that's a really important distinction. Like being powerless for the sake of being powerless, like being punished but not understanding what action you took to receive that consequence, that's really hard. That contributes to that powerlessness. But like ultimately it's about like being in the story, and also it's a game. Like it's a game, and you should be having fun.
Yeah.
And I think that we have a lot of like offline, when another player rolled that 100 on the D100 and then ended up in the Feywild, but you guys knew where a portal was to get back home.
Yeah.
The rest of the party could get there. He found allies really quickly that he was able to work with. It made this whole like really fun side plot that like happened like at the same time. That was definitely like, it was a consequence, and it was something that he and I had agreed on in advance. And like I just feel like there are a lot more like pieces that line up that make it fit a lot better. Versus just that like, fuck you just to fuck you, I guess. Like,
yeah, well, what would have happened if he had rolled a 100? I know which character you're talking about. If they had rolled a 100, they'd gone to the Feywild, and then you had said, oh, it only lasted 30 seconds, or only lasted, whatever, and they pop back in. I feel like
cool, I can do that anytime. I had no consequences to anything at all.
Yeah.
No stakes.
And it would cheapen it. Yep. The stakes are gone. they're gone. And what's going to stop that player from constantly doing that, or that character from constantly doing that? So it's, I think when you, the character feeling powerless is when they're getting a consequence or they're getting a punishment and they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
They just are they're existing, and all of a sudden they're getting punished, which you can have, if you're not making active choices and stuff, there can still be things happening in the background. If your inaction can cause
Oh, certainly.
yeah, your character's inaction. If they refuse to go slay this dragon, it's gonna, burn down the town.
It's gonna wreak havoc. It's gonna destroy the town. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was still a choice they made. It wasn't this dragon burned down the town and there was nothing you could have done about it. Like, just...
We talked about this recently, and I think that was the exact example you used. That, or something like the party goes through a town and decides not to stop it from burning down, and when they return, it's like ashes. You didn't save the town. Those people don't exist anymore. Versus going through, seeing there's a fire, stopping it, saving these people, and now there are people to interact with. You have a trader who maybe gives you a better deal than they would have in any other town. Like, they're, like, action, reaction, and that's really hard to do as a DM when you have, like, an idea of what's going to happen next. And that's why, like, I would really encourage DMs to zoom out a little bit more, like, who are the players, like, make it a little bit more character driven as opposed to plot driven, because
absolutely, yeah,
when your D&D campaign is plot driven, that means that there are beats that are going to happen, and unless you're writing a choose your own adventure and you're expecting this thing to branch out into this, like, crazy mass of web of options, you're really, like, that's too linear, and that's when players feel railroaded. So instead, you should be looking at, like, there's this person, they're trying to come into power for this reason, here are the things they're going to try to do, and how the players interact with these situations will impact the way that bad guy feels about them and how they go about their plan. I feel like having a singular source, or, like, one group of people, I like when capitalism is the enemy, of course, and that can still be character driven, because it's just like, what are these people within the system doing? How are they impacting the group, the party? And then you can kind of, like, and then you can make space for things like, one character keeps saying that he likes meat pies. Great. I'm going to make sure that there's a chef in this next town who's missing the ingredients he needs for meat pies, and the party has to go out, fuck off, and do, like, a little side quest. Great. That means that you've added more story based on what the players want to do, and they're going to be automatically more engaged because you're catering the story to fit what they want. Like, it just works.
Yeah. It should be character driven. 100%. Like, it is character driven. You have your plot points set wherever, but you're gonna have to shuffle them based on where the characters go. And same with, like, the NPCs. You could, if you were really wanting to, like, stick to your story a little bit more, your campaign that you built, is instead of having specific, they go here to this town and do this, and then that triggers this and that, have more of, like, a theme. You could have a theme that kind of makes everything cohesive. So, like you were mentioning, capitalism, perhaps the regime or the kingdom, the guards come to all these towns and tax everybody. So anytime they go to a town, there are these guards and they're taking tax. So it's like this constant pressure, and just a theme that they're having to sneak around a lot more because of these guards, or maybe they steal some of their armor and they want to use that to sneak in, and just have that. They can go to any town, they can go anywhere, and that is happening. And it's just kind of a theme. And that's, like, say that's your ultimate goal, is they need to stop this. Make something that's flexible and able to be kind of shifted around. So with Curse of Strod, Lord Strod can appear at any moment, anytime. That's in the campaign. Anytime he can just show up, or they can show up at your camp. They can show up after an encounter. It's like this constant presence. No matter where they go in Barovia, your characters are exposed to that final end boss. And I love that. I know that with, like, Icefire, it's that way with the dragon.
Yeah, there's like that looming presence of the dragon.
right? That presence of a dragon. So if you're building a campaign, you could do that. You have a presence of, helping. You need to help the weak. You can really see there's a caste system imbalance in the world all the time. And while they're going and doing all these little quests or leveling up and that kind of thing, that is just happening everywhere they go. It's universal. And so it allows a little bit of structure to your story, but not so much that they're railroaded, that they're cornered.
You mentioned Wizards of the Coast modules, which I like. We play a lot of them. Our next campaign that we're writing is going to be 100% homebrew, but I think the Wizards of the Coast modules are kind of a fun example of how a campaign can be character driven instead of plot driven. I know it seems like when the book's already drafted, how is there any room for character decisions? But like, I think, so Waterdeep Dragon Heist that we started with is kind of a fun example because it's, first of all, you have 4 different villains to choose from, which is so fun. I love that. But it's like this stone, the Stone of Galore was stolen long ago. Someone has it. There is money in a vault somewhere, and there are 4 different villains. You could pick one. That one villain that wants that money, and the party can kind of choose to engage with it or not. And things are happening around them, like a fireball goes off, and like that just happens around. Like that one is like on a timer, and it's very like, if the players choose to investigate, here's what they find. And if they're just like, oh, I hate this town, we should leave. They can.
Mm-hmm.
They find out what like each villain is up to. So we're using the Castle Lantern. So spoilers for Hell of a Summer, the Castle Lantern thread of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. But you guys have just learned that Victoria and Amalia Castellanter have made a deal that they need that money from the vault, and they need to kill 100 people in order to save the lives of their 2 children. And then the party has to decide. We keep calling it like, oh, I love the D&D trolley problem, because like the players have to decide, sacrifice 2 children or say, which is like they're kind of on track for because you guys stole the money from the vault, or let 100 people die so these kids can live. And like, so the party gets to kind of make a decision. It's very character driven. And if they like never get this information, if they don't get there fast enough and something just happens, then this mass death event happened in town, and they're going to hear about it. And the players and their characters will have impacted the town because of their inaction, right? There's that like consequence again. And then
Yep.
Dragon of Ice Sparrow Peak, there's this looming threat of this white dragon that we see everywhere, and it's really wreaking havoc, and it's up to the players to decide we want to fight it or we don't. And there's like a lot of other stuff happening in that module. And then of course our DM is homebrewing so much of it that it's like really hard to tell where the module starts in the homebrew. He's really good at it, so it's really hard, like, is this a real character or did you make this up? It's like a little confusing, but I love that.
Yeah.
And it's such a fun way to run a story, and then it lets the players decide what their characters would do and how they want to interact with stuff. And it's just like I just think it's a better way to shape the story. And it kind of is less pressure on the DM because like, I don't need to know what happens next session. I just need to know, here are some paths you might take, roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like with Curse of Strahd, Barovia, the overall theme is, how do you leave? You're trapped in this mist world. How do you leave? They can go wherever they want, do whatever they want. You have the module lays out, I feel like, an overabundance of information.
It's really dense. It's not a good first time DM. That's tough stuff, I think.
It is. But like, for example, like Death House that you guys went through, every single room. I mean, that could have been a 6-7 hour dungeon crawl. And you guys bypassed the whole area, and it was great. I'm so glad you did, because it's why, if you're, but the module does that. And any of the encounters, it gives you, this room has this room has this, and it just, your characters are gonna, players are gonna miss most of that, but it just gives it all to you. And then you take what you need and what you don't. And it's just an overabundance, which I feel like is great, because it's like a security blanket a little bit. But I always, before an encounter, read through it real quick, kind of figure out what's important, what's not, and then make sure that you come across that important stuff, even if you bypass those rooms. Just kind of lay it out there. But the overall theme is trying to escape Barovia and go home. And that unifies your characters together. That gives them a common goal. But it's not, they still have to figure out a lot of things. They have to unravel the mystery of this place. I think it's just a great example. If you're trying to build a campaign, have an overall theme or goal and make it kind of like very like specific. Escape Barovia. Period.
Take down the capitalists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Destroy the economy. Easy.
Well.
Okay. Hone it in a little bit. Hone it in a little bit then. Yeah.
This city. Yeah, exactly. Reappoint a new king, the rightful heir to the throne. Get them
reallocate. The infrastructure within the city in a way that makes it fairer for everyone.
Yeah. So just make that specific, and then everything else is just kind of fluid. And then the characters, as a player, I wouldn't feel like I would have that in the back of my mind, the constant pressure. I want to escape. And so every NPC I talk to, every interaction I do, anywhere I go, that's my ultimate. All my choices will lead to how do we leave? Oh, that's great. You gave me this item. How does that help me leave? And give me more information to tell me I need to take it here, and then I need to do this. Okay, where's that town? How do I get there? Where's the map? Everything is motivated by that one goal. And then I think that just lessens the stagnation a little bit. I can't guarantee it won't, because I know sometimes players I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Sometimes they don't know, and sometimes they tune out. Like sometimes they lose interest, and it's like, okay, I need to make this more interesting, or we need to figure out how to can this campaign.
And that's where that make your characters wow. That usually comes from my experience, some sort of big lore drop, or a secret spilled, or explosion, I suppose, or coming back to town and the orchard's on fire. Make something dramatic. An instance of dramatic that makes your characters really pay attention. The ones that are kind of not paying attention will pay attention. And as far as planning that, you're gonna have to know your campaign. You're gonna have to know your characters. But I think if you can leave a little bit of clues along the way, and then they ask the right question. We were talking about the rewards. That's the time. Give that reward of that important lore or location of something. Because that's the time. Then they're going to keep asking questions.
In fiction, it's putting the gun on the table, and in D&D, it's when you put the big timer on the table, the big hourglass, and you just watch their faces. No, go ahead, take your time. Like, yeah.
As a DM, you're gonna. I know a lot of times you just do sit back. You let the character. That's the best, right? When the characters, the players are just interacting, talking back and forth. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And you take some notes and that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't want to say there's winning in D&D, because I feel like it's the one game that there isn't winning. But as a DM, watching the players interact, work through something, that's winning. I agree. Feel that's success. They're having a great time, and they're immersed. That's winning. So even when they're rolling bad dice, because you can't blame your dice. Even in failure in D&D, still great storytelling, and it's like the one game that if you fail at something, it's still fun. It can still be fun.
It can still be fun. Yeah. Well, thanks for talking today about. Well, now I feel like it's winning. Writing a story that wows your player and is winning. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to implement these in our session. I feel like every time we talk about it, I'm just like, I can't wait to do this. But like, I do truly like we talk about this and I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. Let's go. Let's write some shit.
Well, we're out of initiative, but we're going to get back into it. So go roll some dice and tell some stories, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
14th time's a charm. Right? 14th episode. No.
This is 15.
15.
This is 15.
Oh my gosh. 15 episodes.
What's a season? Because I noticed that Anchor tells us it's season 1 episode, and then like, what's a season?
I don't know. What's a season?
I mean, a season of a K-drama is 16 episodes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe this is the pre-finale episode. Things are going to get really exciting,
Yeah.
super spicy. Or maybe it's just a mid-season finale and we're going American. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We may never know.
I don't know. But it's a lot. 15's great.
15 is great, yeah.
Yeah.
Considering it took us 3.5 years to record episode 2,
Yep.
from when Brandon and I recorded episode 1 to now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like we're doing great. And a couple of the players even came to me and said, like, I just feel like there's so much happening. It's like my webcam just gave up.
Yeah. I don't know what's happening. Oh.
That's not what it should be. Okay, let's try camera. Oh. Yeah, and I lost my train of thought. NPCs. Oh.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's hard to kind of balance that, like.
Not picking up my. There we go.
Oh,
Wasn't
yeah, you got
picking
really
up
quiet.
I
I
know.
couldn't hear you at all.
I was yelling. I want to be heard.
Don't we all?
Thanks for listening to Out of Initiative, a podcast from Merely NPCs. For more from Sarah and Morgan, visit merelynpcs.com or follow them on Instagram @merelynpcs.